and good day to everyone who's watching my video. Today I want to explain how I constructed my portfolio in the in the course of portfolio management under the supervision of Dr. Mahmoud Atifi. First, I started to gather data for 15 stocks, which were the most actively traded stocks in EGX 30 for the last 3 months in 2022. So these are the stocks I gathered the information for. And for each stock, I gathered the information for 2 months from January 1st, 2023 until March 1st of 2023. I got the return for each stock by subtracting new minus old over the old, and then I got the expected return for each stock through getting the average for all the daily returns, and I got the standard deviation using this formula, standard deviation for sample, also for all the returns of the stock. And I got the variance also for all the stocks, and later on I'll show why I got the variance. Also, I used the CAPM model to get the expected return for each stock using the risk-free rate, using the treasury bill for 1 year. I got its return and divided by 365 to get the daily return for it, which is 0.065%. And also I got the market return here. As we can say, for the same time span, I got the expected return for the market, also by getting the average for changes in return daily. And I got the expected return using the CAPM model for each stock by using the risk-free rate plus the beta for each stock, which I got also from investing.com, divided by the difference between the market return and the risk-free rate. Then I started to construct the covariance matrix. The covariance matrix is very important to get the return and risk for my portfolio after giving weight, of course, for each stock. So while I got here the returns for each stock, the daily return for each stock, as we can see from the first sheet. And here we can see I constructed first the covariance matrix here from using the data and the data analysis tool. And I used the covariance one, but this tool gives us the covariance for the population, and I didn't select all the population, I only selected a sample out of the population. So I had to adjust the covariance matrix to get the covariance for the sample. So I got the fraction between the n, which is 40, and the n minus 1. I got the fraction between them, and I multiplied this fraction by all, as we can see here, by all of this covariance to get the adjusted covariance for each stock. So as we can see here, the covariance for this stock ended by 894, and here for the same stock, which is the CIB, it was also ending by 894, so it was correct. Then I started to work on my weighting strategy. As we can see here, I had multiple weighting strategies, and after conducting all of them, I decided on the best one. So here we have the expected return using historical data for each stock, the betas also for all the stocks, and I started by giving equal weight to each stock. As we can see here, I got the return for my portfolio by using this function transpose, and I inserted the weights and then the expected return for each stock. As for the variance, I used also this formula that take into consideration the weights for each stock and the covariance matrix that takes into consideration the returns for each stock. And to get the standard deviation, I get the square root for the variance, and I also get the Sharpe ratio as an indicator for each portfolio to see which one gives me the highest Sharpe ratio. So I subtracted the risk-free rate from the return from my portfolio and divided by the standard deviation for each portfolio. Also, I used Excel solver, and I set the objective function to maximize the return. By maximizing the return, I didn't set a constraint for the standard deviation, as we can see. So the Excel solver told me to invest in 5 stocks by putting 20% in each one. Also for reference, I used EGX30 as my benchmark. So my objective was to get a risk close to its risk and try to outperform its return. So that's what I did here. What I did here was setting an objective function to minimize the variance, as we can see here. Data and then solver. I tried to minimize the variance by changing the weights here, and I put some constraints. I want the summation of all the weights to be 100%. I wanted the standard deviation. I wanted a return on my portfolio to be not less than 0.5%, and also I wanted to invest in the stocks by not putting more than 20% in one stock. And then I solved for these constraints, and I got a standard deviation of 1.26%, and as I said, a return of 0.5%, which hypothetically should outperform the EGX30. And also I got the Sharpe ratio for this, and it was high comparing to the other methods, as we can see. Also, to validate that this is the best weighting method, I used the market capitalization method. So I got the market cap for each stock, and then got the summation for them here, and got the weight by dividing each market cap for the summation for all the market caps, and I got a return by this amount, but the risk was relatively high comparing to the other methods. Also, I wanted to get the lower risk, so I got here all the risk for the 15 stocks, and here 1 minus the risk, and here the weight I just divided 1 minus the risk for each stock by the summation for them, but it gave me very low return, even lower than the market. So finally, I decided on this method. Excel solver told me to invest in only 10 stocks out of the 15 because they involved lower risk, and also it has the better Sharpe ratio, as you can see here. And here's how I divided the amount I was initially investing over the 15 stocks. I also tried to get the data for my portfolio to have a better understanding of how my portfolio would look like. So here I have all the weights the Excel solver told me to use, and here I multiplied each weight by the daily return of the stocks. So here we have the weighted average for all the stocks daily, as you can see, and here is the return for each F30 for the same day. As you can see, some days they were having positive returns or negative returns, so they were moving in the same direction. And some other days, my portfolio had a positive return, while EGX30 had a negative return, and here we have vice versa. So I got the variance for EGX30 using the variance formula, and I got the covariance for my portfolio using the returns for my portfolio and the returns for EGX30, and I divided both of them to get the beta, and the beta was 1.09, which involves a greater risk So if the market had a return of 100%, my portfolio would have a return of 109%. So my portfolio is expected to outperform the market, but also it involves, as I mentioned, a greater risk. Also, I tried to get the beta another way. So I used the regression analysis tool from the data tool in Excel, and it got me an X coefficient of the same amount, which is 1.09. So I knew that I calculated the beta the right way. Also, I wanted to know why I had a positive beta and greater than 1, so I graphed the return for my portfolio and for each X30 during the same time span. And as we can see here, in many periods, my portfolio was moving the same direction as each X30, but here and here, my portfolio outperformed each X30 greatly due to a very high positive return from Abu Qir stock. As we can see here, my portfolio this day had a return of 5%, while the market had a return of 0.4%. Also here, so this may resulted in the high beta. Moving to how I constructed my portfolio itself. Here I got the weight for all the stocks. Here's the expected return as I am expecting from the solver, and here's the expected standard deviation. And I started my investment using 100,000, and I used Fender simulation to construct my portfolio. I had a strategy of investing each week on Wednesday. When I was to invest, I see how much cash I had on hand, and I multiply this amount by the weights, as we can see here, to know the amount I should put in each stock. And I see the stock price in this day and divide the amount by the stock price to know how many stocks in each stock I should buy. And after 1 week, I start to see the technical analysis on investing or trading view or Mubashir, or if there's a news that one stock is going to decline or going to increase, to decide whether to sell or to buy. And when I decide to sell, I sell the whole amount or the whole number of stocks I've bought in this stock. So let's have an example. I started my portfolio from March 15 until May 17. So it was a 2-month investment. I invested the whole amount, which is, as I mentioned, 100,000. At the end of the day, I had no cash on hand. So the next week, on March 22, I started to see the technical analysis, and I sold the stocks I got in CIB, and EFIC, and EFIZ. So I had a free cash on hand amounted by 38,000, or amounting to 38,000. So the next week, this is the cash I had on hand. I also started to see the technical analysis, and it told me to buy back stocks in these shares here, and also it told me to sell in other stocks. So this is the amount I ended with to get the amount that I would have on hand the next week. As we can see here, I subtracted the amount I reinvested from the free cash, and then added the amount I sold with, and repeated the same strategy over 10 weeks until May 17 and May 10th. I sold all the stocks, as we can see here, and I ended the investment with 126,000, so I had a positive return. Also, I had around 70 transactions, so on average I had 6 transactions each week. Here we can see the initial investment and the ending investment, and to get the total return, I subtracted the initial investment from the ending investment and divided by the initial investment, and I had a total return of 26%. And to get a daily return, I divided by the number of days I was investing through. Here, to evaluate the performance of my portfolio, we can see that I was expecting, if my portfolio was optimal, to have a return of 0.5%, but I had a return of 0.48%, which is close enough. But here's the actual return on each X30 during the same time span, and I outperformed the market, as we can see here. And also I got the expected return for the market using the CAPM model, and I outperformed also the market, if this was my assumption. So overall, my investment was successful. I also got some measurements to evaluate the performance of my portfolio. So I got the Sharpe ratio. It was positive, but it was lower than the expected one that I got here, which is expected because I got a lower return than I was expecting. And also I got the trainer ratio and the Jensen alpha, and they both were positive because I had a positive return and it was outperforming the market. The last thing here, here is the market capitalization for my portfolio daily from the starting date of March 15 until May 17. And as we can see here, here's the change from day to day and the average change daily. That was all my portfolio. It was a very nice experience to try to invest myself in the stock market, and I hope you enjoyed this video.